All right. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Rich, and this is the Scuttlebutt. Today I have a very interesting trapper from Ontario. Yes, Ontario. And most of his work is animal damage control. Please welcome Steve Belanger. How are you today, Steve?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I was just out checking my trail cams this morning, and I've got a couple of bull elk and a fair to middling white-tailed buck on my land. So I might be busy the next few mornings, but
Yeah, you bet. There'd only be squirrels on my trail cam in the backyard.
oh,
And the dogs chase them away most of the time.
well, we have this ongoing battle, and it's so funny because when you get this time of the year, you're trying to hunt animals, right?
You bet.
And up to this point, I see the moose, the elk, the deer, whatever, in my wife's garden, and I open the door, and the dogs go out flying and chase them off, right? And now when I go to the door and I'm packing a gun and I'm sneaking, and the dogs are all there, and
that'd be my boys. As soon as they see a gun, they know they're out there waiting. Especially if you start looking down the sights of it, they're waiting for that snap because it means something died.
What kind of dogs you got?
Both Jack Russells, big Jack Russells. Yeah, terrier. I'm a terrier guy. I use them out on the line whenever I'm trapping winter coyotes. I use them out on the line. They're my trap line dogs, we'll say. They help with, where you have spots where all the terrain meets, but maybe you don't have the sign, like you don't have a track. If it's a certain time of year when I'm doing ADC stuff, if it's a time of year, I don't have a track, I don't have a pile of scat, but they're traveling through and they always got all these nice key locations, right? They got to pee on something. So my one dog is actually fairly unique. You can actually tell between a coyote and a fox if it's marked there. Because if it's a fox, he'll kind of do a little dance, like, and they smell something real nice. They start trying to rub up on something. If it's a fox, it's peed on something. That's what he'll do.
Really?
If it's a coyote, he'll always mark over top of it. And then he'll scratch. You know how the dogs, how they start kicking up the ear, but he only has ever done that with coyote. It's only ever been coyote.
That's very cool.
With other dogs. So, once you find that fire hydrant, or like I said, everything comes together, but you're not actually getting the sign. You can't visually see the sign, but you get the dogs out, they smell it, and they'll show you what's there.
And it's true, I got an old buddy, and his wife has a dog that, honest to God, is a furry slippers with legs. I mean, it's just
you bet. Yeah.
One of those whatevers. But you can't ever hack on him about his dog because he'll get on you. He says, "Do you know how many coyotes and wolves that dog has killed?"
Yeah.
And you laugh about it. And he says, "No," and he tells the story just like what you do. That he'll be walking around trying to figure a place to set a trap, especially like a people's trap, and he says that the dog will put him on it every time, and he says otherwise, he says, unless they've freshly peed there in the snow, you don't know it.
You don't know it, like, the time of year where the grass is green and all the cover's up and everything, like you're looking for a track. Well, there's no track on grass unless you get enough, get lucky and they cross the spot where there's some mud or something and you can see a footprint. But like I say, you're trying to be on location, but you don't want to set a trap for the sake of setting it, but you want to make sure. Well, my dogs, they help me out. They taught me a lot more about coyotes than I would learn on my own, to be honest. Just how they, and plus, it makes it a heck of a lot of a time saver whenever I like to drag a lot of coyotes, and whenever I catch them, and it makes it a lot tough if they do get a little bit further and I can't find the coyote on the drag right away. It's a lot easier when I let the dogs out and they go and they pile into a coyote quick.
They all think those Jack Russells, like we've hunted South Africa several times, and they love the Jack Russell over there in South Africa, and the Parsons, I believe.
Yeah, Parsons, yeah. My red one, he's more like a Parsons. Yeah, he's a little bit slimmer built, and yeah.
I don't know the difference, but they let them loose, and none of them have any manners whatsoever, and they're boneheaded as can be. But make a bad shot on an animal, and you'll pack them food for a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you bet.
they take after them. They hit that scent, and you don't even have to look down. You just listen for them to be barking somewhere, and you follow right to that bark, and they'll be going around and around that animal, and keeping it staying in one spot so you catch up. Hey folks, Rich from Trapping Inc. TV here. And we all have our idea of the perfect morning. You know what I'm talking about. For me, the perfect morning starts with the aroma and flavor of freshly brewed Old Smokes coffee. Studies have shown that just the smell of fresh coffee can boost brain activity. No kidding. Well, that's certainly no secret to me. I can barely talk before that first cup. Just ask Sandy. I'm a dark roast man, and Old Smokes Coffee's darkest roast, Stout Maple, is what gets my day in gear. Extra dark, it's strong, aromatic, and smooth. Gets me revved up for whatever the day throws at me. Old Smokes roast their coffee over wood fires, the old-fashioned way. Wood roasting takes more time, much longer than modern hot air roasting. Slow roasting over wood takes the bitter out of the bean and imparts a heavenly taste and aroma from the wood smoke. Old Smokes makes a roast perfect for each person. There are 5 roasts, from light to extra dark, each roasted over a different wood for a unique flavor. Did you know the darker the roast, the lower the caffeine content? It's true. Caffeine is a volatile oil that evaporates with roasting. The lightest roast has the most caffeine, and the darkest roasts have the most flavor. Right now, you can order from their online store and use our promo code RICH, that's RICH, and get 10% off your entire order. Pretty simple. Just go to www.oldsmokescoffee.com, that's OLE smokescoffee.com, and use the promo code RICH. That is promo code RICH for 10% off your entire order. And now let's get to today's show.
Well, what I used to do, kind of like I kind of got into it at the same time as I did trapping. I got into falconry, so I was a falconer for. I guess I still am. I don't practice it anymore. But I actually got them for flushing rabbits and actually squirrels, because what I hunted mostly was squirrels with the raptors that I trap. So
that would be cool if you could do ADC work with a raptor.
Well, I did do it for a little bit, but it was more so there's a company. So how I kind of I got into it. I got into trapping. It was kind of finally something that I got into, and then I had a job opportunity where I got in more into the actual ADC field, and this is kind of, I was kind of green to trapping, or very green to trapping, but this ADC kind of influenced how I trap, and then it's evolved from there to what I do now. But I got into falconry. This company, they did bird control, and they're using raptors to scare off nuisance birds mainly. So, you have a landfill with excess amounts of gull activity and stuff like that. You'd use introducing a predator, an apex predator to those birds would be satisfactory to scaring them off. And every now and then your birds would catch them, and it would promote further scaring and get that permits and stuff like that too to catch them. But yeah, we killed a lot of beach chickens over the years with flying hawks on them and stuff. So it was pretty cool.
That's fascinating. So how? I got a ton of questions about that. We're going to go down a big rabbit hole here. How trainable is a hawk? Or, pardon me, you call them raptors. What are you actually using?
So I flew mostly hawks, but when it comes to your raptors, there's hawks, like birds that we would call falconry birds. There's hawks, falcons, and eagles. Your owls are in there too, and your vultures, but neither of them are really viable. Well, it's just like, you don't want the gun that shoots slower and less accurate. You want the gun that shoots faster, hits harder, more accurate. So that's what it is with falconry. You want the birds that, for one, are actually workable. Your owls are kind of big and slow and dumb type deal. Well, you want the faster predator. So I flew mostly hawks whenever I was doing hunting with them. That's just me going out with the dogs, trying to bust a rabbit, bust a squirrel. I use mostly hawks. There's guys that fly falcons on ducks and stuff. Like Saskatchewan has a lot better terrain for flying falcons, big open country, and a lot more game birds. But it's so training a hawk. Yeah, they are. And to be honest, the wild ones are easier to train.
Really? Which hawks did you use? Like,
I used red-tail hawk.
The red-tail. Okay.
The red-tail. And then we used, for bird control, we use a lot of kind of the workhorse. It's called a Harris hawk, or a Harris's hawk. So they're in Arizona. kind of in the Sonoran Desert. They're the only raptor that I know of. I may be wrong, but they're the only raptor that I know of that hunt in packs in the wild.
Really?
Yeah, they hunt like wolves.
And you bring them up to Ontario to hunt?
Yeah, so these are all captive bred birds. That so in order to use them for a commercial purpose, they cannot be wild taken birds. If you follow.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
can't go and trap a hawk and then use it for my business. So that's where captive breeding has always come in. You buy captive bred birds, you train them, and then you put them to purpose type thing. But for hunting, you apply here in Ontario. It's like a lottery type system. You apply for a permit to trap a wild bird, and then you may get it, you may not. So if you get one, then you can go out and you can trap whatever bird is on their list. So for me, I flew mostly red-tailed hawks.
So when you're working them, are you just basically throwing them up and they chase whatever flies away from them, or
pretty well
target something?
Pretty well. So like training them, it's not a love relationship. It's not like your dog that, you know, they see you, they're happy to see you. With training or any type of raptor, it's well, without getting into a bunch of, like I say, like you said, going down a rabbit hole here without getting too much into it. When you're trapping a wild bird, it's a food relationship. So at first I trap a bird, get equipment on them, get them tied down. You start reducing their weight. Anybody can take a bird and starve it or take an animal and starve it to the point that it has no choice but to take food from you. But you're trying to strategically lower their weight. You're trying to find that sweet spot where the animal is still healthy enough to fly and hunt game, but it is responsive to you. Because if they live in the now, if they're presently not hungry, they presently don't give a crap about you type thing.
No kidding.
Yeah, so it's developing what you call a hunting weight, flying weight, and then the training comes from there. Okay, I get the bird to eat off my glove. Then I get the bird to jump 12 inches off the perch onto my glove, and then I get them to come 10 feet to the glove on a creance, on like a line. And then next, you know, I'm free flying the bird, and then you're putting telemetry and you're putting game in front of them. And the hawk is, especially a wild bird, it's smart enough to develop, or it's smart enough to realize that it's better off hunting with you than it is by itself.
Really? That's fascinating.
And the time of year I'm trapping a red tail is kind of this time of year. So most raptors, once the parents are done feeding them, they kick them to the curb and they say, you know, have a good life type thing. And that's why there's such a high mortality rate in raptors. 75, 80% of the young will die by winter type deal. So what you're doing by trapping them later on in the year, like November, is you're weeding out all of those animals that were maybe not meant to survive. You know, some people don't like to hear that, but not everything is meant to survive, right? You know,
in most cases, you know, depending on fish, they count on 1% of those of the eggs to make it to spawn themselves. And you know, with some of the mammals and that, the marten and that kind of thing, they count on 10% making it to breed on their own. I mean, nature oversupplies in a big way.
Yeah, and so that was kind of my strategy. And you start trapping this time of year. And then you're getting a bird, it's already been out, it's already been hunting for itself, it's been feeding itself. All I'm doing is convincing it that I am a better hunting partner. And my dog, actually, they actually, most of the time they get to following the dogs around more because the dogs are better at producing game for them than I am.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Do your hawks leave? Do your hawks migrate there? Like ours are gone now.
Yes. Yeah, you will get a migration. I'm sure it's already happened. I know a lot of people in the community that they do like the bird banding, and they get them on the migration. They get them in mist nets and band them and release them and stuff. So your red tails, they do migrate to a certain point, but here in southern Ontario, I find a lot of birds that would normally migrate don't migrate anymore.
Well, yeah, you guys are a long way south of us, and
yeah, sure.
So you're a lot warmer there. I know the only brush I've had with falconry whatsoever had to do with them using them for keeping birds off of airports. You know,
there is a company that has a contract there, and because bird strike obviously is such an issue that, you know, having having guys like that. I never did airports, but like we were in the same kind of business before. So I dabbled with a bit of that, but then trapping was the thing that I, learned back in history class a long time ago about the old time trappers, and this country was built on it, and it was something I thought was always cool. But like, I'm a first generation trapper. Like, there's hunters in my family and everything. Maybe there's trappers down the line. I've never heard of it, but I'm kind of just figured it out for myself, and just kind of finally pulled the trigger on getting into it. Got my license and started dabbling, but again, like, I didn't have a mentor or anybody that,
Well, good for you though. I mean,
like literature and stuff like that. But
that's the overwhelming comment that Sandy and I get when we're out at sportsman shows and all that kind of stuff, or people write us an email, and I've been doing email all morning, answering email from the weekend. They say exactly like you said, they learned about trapping in school, and how it, it opened the Western nation and all that kind of stuff. And then they say the next thing, which is so sad, they say, I didn't realize it was still legal.
Well, I'm surprised. I don't really do the social media thing too much, but every now and then I peruse on, Facebook, and I see some local hunting pages and stuff, and maybe a guy gets on there and he's a trapper, he's trapped something, and then you see the comments. You start reading the comments, and all these people, oh, I thought that was illegal. I didn't know foot traps were even allowed to be used. It's like, you guys are hunters, and you don't know, like, you've never met a trapper, and you don't know that it's still alive and well.
It's so funny when you talk about foot traps, like foot holding.
Yeah.
The world has gone upside down here. We went from, they were banning us from our fur going to Europe, and that had to do mostly with what back then we called them leg holds, and the damage they did and all that. Well, now footholds have advanced so much where we've got into offsets and laminated jaws and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's catch and release over and over again. I mean, God knows my neighbor's dog is a frequent flyer, and I think I've caught it like 9 to 10 times over the last couple of years, and they're undamaged. But now in the States, a lot of places, the snares cannot be lethal. They have to be what they call a restraint cable, and
relaxing cable restraint.
Yeah,
we're on the bandwagon there.
Yeah, that way, or they actually prefer the foot holding. So when they the animals are caught, they can be released without being harmed and everything. And it was the leg hold that started the whole war with Europe. Isn't it funny how it has changed? How we came back in a circle.
Yeah, well, like, I've been in the States a lot. Like, when I messaged you back before, I talked about education. Like, for me getting into trap, for me all my life, whenever I dive into something, I dive into it, full bore, and I want to know how to do things correctly. I'm not necessarily, I don't want to say I don't want to go figure it out for myself, but you want to really cut that learning curve as much as possible. So that's why, I was fortunate enough, I started off in beaver trapping, a lot of water trapping, and then, doing all the nuisance stuff. I did a lot of nuisance stuff in Toronto, cage trapping, for this outfit that I was working for, and learned a lot. Went to Indiana, learning from their organization there in Nakoa, which is a big wildlife control operator organization. Learning from all the pros there on different aspects of the job, and, talking to these guys, and just different. It's amazing how different each state is compared to Canada, where we kind of have an overwhelming, there's more or less, there's one standard, but in the States, it's the Wild West. Like, you go to Mark Zager in New York, and, all they can use is foothold traps.
Yeah.
You go to Massachusetts, all they can use is cage traps.
Yeah.
You go to New Jersey, all they can use is snares and cage traps.
I know.
3 states right in the same proximity of each other, and they're all night and day. It's funny, but.
And it is so strange because, like I say, on one hand, the foothold was a terrible, evil thing because it damaged it. Now they like it because you can release. And then the other side of it, here in Alberta, very quickly, our snares are going to be mandated to either be a power ram, which is pretty much instantly lethal, or to have a killing spring on it, so that it's very quickly lethal as also. Where you're not going to be able to have a snare that doesn't have a way of quick killing. Like,
mechanical type feature.
yeah. Yeah, and the reason behind that is their thoughts is that, you know, the longer the animal is there, it's you know, under the stress of being, you know, of being restrained and all that. And yet other places think that just restraining them is fine until you come up and dispatch it, right? You know.
Yeah, you know, it for myself, like, we're fortunate now that we're able to use in Southern Ontario now, we're able to use a relaxing cable restraint. It's kind of a double-edged sword, Rich, like, you know, because we didn't have any type of tool in the toolbox like that before. You know, we can't use snares, anything south of I believe it's like the French River. We can't use suspended snares, or let alone anything mechanical. So before that, you know, trappers didn't have those types of tools, anything like a snare type device. Is it better than a snare? I don't think so. There are certain situations where I wish I could just use.
Hey, Rich here. Sandy and I are pleased at the rapid growth of our exclusive community, Trapping Inc. at locals.com. We created the community to connect more closely with our fans, friends, and supporters without the interference and censorship of social media companies. Because this community is subscriber exclusive, there is no censored photos, shadow banning, and deplatforming as happens on Twitter and Facebook. Trolls are non-existent, as not a one will spend a nickel and put their money where their mouth is to protest on a paid site. You know it. We are steadily moving all Trapping Inc. YouTube videos and podcasts as quickly as time and bandwidth allow. We're tickled and surprised to see how large of library we must move. As well, we are sharing articles on trapping and guns and shooting. Our new TV series, Married to the Hunt, videos are here too. Hours and hours of never before released to the internet hunting and fishing from around the world. TrappingInc.locals.com will be the exclusive home of all Trapping Inc. content from the past and into the future. What else is there to do? Well, there's a forum for everyone to post pictures on and interact. You can message us directly on TrappingInc.locals.com, as well as interact with all the other subscribers. These are all people with common interests. Get in here. This whole venture is about taking the Trapping Inc. TV community to the next level, building a community of shared interest and interacting with all of our friends. Who knows where we can go from here? Just go to locals.com and sign up for a free account. Then search for Trapping Inc. and subscribe for $5 a month. That's it. Go to locals.com to open a free account and then subscribe for $5 a month to Trapping Inc. Help us spread the truth about a way of life and the responsible, ethical management of the wild resources. TrappingInc.locals.com. Now back to the show.
You know, and another thing is training. You know, guys maybe having something that getting guys to be trained on using these devices properly. You know.
Well, and it's funny because I know that a couple of the folks that I've dealt with in the U.S. and, you know, one guy was I forget which state it was. Anyway, they were not allowed to have lethal snares. Yet the locks they were using, we use lethally here all the time. And
yeah,
they would say, well,
it's a process, Rich, too. Like it's a process. So it's not alone. It's not the lock. It's not the cable size. It's not the deer stop. It's not the breakaway device. It's or the location. It's everything all together that makes it. Because I can guarantee you, I put an RCR and I put it in the wrong spot on a fence crawl under or something. I'm going to come back in a couple of days and there's going to be a hung coyote there.
Yeah.
Because of the
entanglement. Yeah.
But it's not setting it in an entanglement. You know, all these different elements to making it. So that being said, a free hanging snare, if it's not put in entanglement, will it kill the animal? It would hold them just like a leash the same.
Well, way back when, and you've probably never heard of or seen these, but we used to make our own snare locks out of haywire. It was basically a figure eight we made out of haywire, heavy wire. Probably half of them died from it. You know, like, I mean, it was lethal to them, right? You know, and it didn't have teeth and it didn't have edges or anything else. It was just haywire. You know, so there's more than just what kind of lock it was that figures into it. So you started and went right into ADC. You didn't start as a residential or trapper or anything like that.
I pretty well. And then, you know, I had some people that I worked with whenever I got into this company that were trapper, like they were fur trappers, but they had evolved into ADC. So I saw both sides of it. But, you know, in my heart, I wanted to be a fur trapper. Like, you know, if I had tomorrow choose between one or the other, like I'm a fur trapper. Like, you know, to trap an animal in a time of year where there's no value to it, you know, it's not something that you take pleasure in, but
No.
there is a need there, this reactive type trapping. When, you know, I've had beaver in the spring, probably just after, you know, there's probably starting to bite each other up and everything, and the pelt isn't, you know, it's not going to be prime. But, you know, these things they did over $60,000 worth of damage to this property. You know, the guy had to come in with the big excavator and the clam bucket and cut down the big chunk of poplar and ream it through the culvert because it was flooding everything out. And,
Yeah.
you know, I had to go in there and be the hammer, you know, and just, you're taking them kind of out of season. But don't get me wrong, you know, I try to utilize the animal. Taking the casters, I'll keep the carcass for bait. The tails right now, there's a guy I work with who collects tails, and he takes them to a guy who makes bow grips out of them.
Oh, cool.
So those, yeah, I like, you know, I got a beaver tail wallet myself. It's the most fantastic wallet I've ever seen. You know, things.
I keep trying to get my hands on one of them, but I can never find somebody. Oh yeah, I'll remember when next time I make some, I'll let you know. Nobody's ever let me know.
Everyone, when they see my wallet, I get lots of people. They ask, "Oh, what is that?" Oh, it's, you know, it's beaver tail. It's, you know, this wallet will be the last wallet I buy for a heck of a long time. You know, and that's cool. And, you know, the pelts I'm actually, I just cut a whole pile of willow today at this one job I just finished up, and I'm going to be trying to all these out of season beaver, because like our beaver right now, like we're just getting into the season pretty well. They're not going to be prime. They're going to be just be blue as blue can be. But, you know, I'm still going to go get those tanned, and I'm going to try and make some hoops. Some of my landowners, I trap coyotes on their property. I like to give them stuff, you know.
Yeah.
She's been good to me. So she's one, I asked her in the spring, would you like a wall hanger for your new house and everything? She said that'd be fantastic. So I'm going to try and make something nice up for her and try and give the animal's death some worth, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. You got to remember though that for, especially I guess probably your part of the world, I mean, the biggest relevance that a trapper has is to control the animals. You know, you're that last bastion of defense between civilization and the wild animals, and so you're not always dealing with them in the best situation. You know, they've caused trouble and people want them gone now. They don't want to hear the story about why you want to or not. For me, my biggest damage control stuff is I do for the county and for a couple of the rural management areas, and for oil companies, like on my registered trap line.
Yeah.
But I won't do beaver in May, June, not until mid-July. And that's just because the young are born and they can't swim for the first month. They count on mom to come back for that first month. I will gladly shoot them the first time their head pops out of the water and they're swimming for the first time. I'd gladly shoot them and not worry about it. But I won't do it and thinking the young are starving to death waiting for mom. So when I do my damage control for those oil companies and those kind of situations, I do them from mid July on if it has to be done. And I really, there's a benefit to that also, is because we also take care of the dams. We either dynamite the dams or dig the dams, and then they can't get it back unless we have an unusual year. They can't get the water back, and so we don't have problem with them for at least a 1 year cycle there. But you know yourself, good beaver habitat is never empty for long.
Well, that's it. You know, there's been a lot of land, and then, you know, you get that spring exodus as well, where I in certain spots I tell people, you know, try not to get too excited unless they're really causing a trouble. Like if they're there and you know they're there, maybe just leave them until the fall. But you start piling up beaver in an area that is very, very nice for other beaver populations. Like, you may be calling me back a couple times because I may take out a couple dispersal beaver. Then, you know, a couple months later, maybe a couple more move in. You know, if you let some of them just kind of control that territory for a while, well, maybe I'm only coming back for 2 beaver in the fall, type thing. You know, just trying to manage wildlife a little bit better, live and let live type thing. You know, the biggest thing whenever I'm doing some of my own work is, can you solve the problem without setting a trap? Whether it's educating the person, maybe habitat modification, like whatever. With beaver, it's easier said than done, but most of the time they're too hard to live with. That you have to resort to trapping, but
and there is no such thing as building some sort of system that they can't dam.
No, and I experienced that. Now I have a contract with a multinational company there now that they have a baffle, and that was the reason why they called me, is because the beaver, no, they didn't plug up the baffle, but they did go 10 feet ahead of the dam that they made, and they made their own dam and started raising the water level. They're better at being beavers than we are trying to figure them out, right? Like they got a lot of respect for them.
It's their job, right? Everybody says, they're so hard working. No, that's their job. They don't worry about a mortgage or a new car or anything else. They get up in the morning, and if I hear water running, then that means they're the best physicists ever, because if there's current, that means they've got something to plug, and away they go. They just get at it. We were doing the last couple of days. We've been out on the trap line and cleaning trails. And one place we go alongside of a lake there, and we're probably 100 yards from the lake is where our trail is, which is a nice way to, you can set marten and fisher and mink traps between the trail and the lake. And the animals travel those lakes even in the wintertime. Even though they can travel on the ice in the wintertime, they travel just like your dog travels on a road, right? He's not on the road. He's just inside the bush. He's in, and that's exactly what the animals do in those situations. But now the beaver have taken and fallen a couple of trees across the trail. Well, if the trees had went towards the lake, they'd have had a lot less work to do. But so instead they fell across a gully and across the trail, and then they've gnawed off all the branches and packed them away. And my wife says they're such hard workers. I says, well, they don't know any different, right?
It's just in total instinct. They're amazing creatures. What they're capable of. I've had so many customers, and you do they call you and they say, okay, well, we have a beaver. We ripped the house apart. We ripped the dam apart. I said, well, did you come out the next day and it was built twice as big and twice as strong? Yeah. Well, that's their way of giving you the middle finger.
Yeah. Well, and they don't know any different. I was helping my son-in-law, my daughter. They have a ranch in Saskatchewan, and the ranch, one corner of one of their half sections or whatever has part of a lake on it, right? And the drainage for the lake comes out and goes through their quarter. Well, the beaver got in there and took and dammed across it. Well, of course, he's got this, I don't know how big a lake it is, a mile by a mile, something like that. So there's a lot of volume of water there.
Yeah.
And, you can tear that out and you can drop the water quickly there, but then the water's still going to come flooding in from the rest of that lake, right? So, I mean, every time he throws a stick back on there, it builds up really quickly. And we got over 2 nights there, we tore it out 2 nights in a row, and we shot 4 beaver, but there was still one left, and still had it dammed up before winter. And I said to Mitch, I says, you got to keep on it, because I said, if there's one left, I said, they'll have it dammed. He's got an unendless resource of water there, that you can't drop, and he's still going to have that current, and as long as there's current, he's going to keep building.
Beaver blitzkrieg, that's what I call it whenever I'm trapping, because I don't go in, you figure out how many approximately are there, but you set a lot more gear than what you think are a beaver, because you try, and especially if that female remains, once you get her out of the mix, in my experience, you can breathe a little easier, because probably the first beaver to die is the big male.
Yeah.
And then you get, and if you can get that matriarch, that the queen bee there, then all the rest of them will just follow suit and just die. But if you leave her and she starts seeing everyone else dying around her, she'll wise up real quick.
Okay, so let's talk about, we've got a problem beaver. We've got a problem dam.
Yeah.
How do you approach this? What do you do? I want to know what kind of sets work for you, or what kind of traps you like. Like for me, people say, oh, I got a beaver problem, I tore out the dam. Well, I hate that. I hate the fact that they disturb the dam before I get there.
Exactly. Yeah. I share the same sentiment. You're better off to just let me come in on my terms and do what I do. So I won't say I throw everything at them. I do keep I do reserve different tricks and everything for certain situations, but I like to do a couple of territorial sets, predict the wind, try and predict the wind as much as you can. And you're going to be on whatever the body of water is, wherever you can, depending on the property line too. Because you got to think, well, I'm dealing with pretty close knit properties a lot of the time. So my wind direction, it may not work for me. So you got to determine that. And if there's a dam, you can utilize that. But my biggest thing is find the lodge.
Okay. Let's take a couple steps back. You've used a couple terms that people are maybe not going to understand. When you talk about territorial set, explain to us what a territorial set is, how you set it up, and do you use a lure? How does it work?
Yeah, so my territorial set. So with beaver, that's going to be a caster. How much they react to, how quickly they react to the smell of another beaver, strange beaver in the area. So I like throwing that territorial set out there because that's where you're going to get your big male. When he comes out, he's on patrol. He's out looking for a fight. So I like throwing in, if I'm using 330s, if it's a viable spot, I can use the big beaver traps or 330s. I'll try and use one stick of caster and set multiple traps on all the inlets to the caster. If you follow me there, if there's multiple little inlets and
channels or kind of thing,
I gang set that with traps, but I'm only using one little stick of caster. I'm not putting my caster mound and my caster right in front of my 330. The reason why I do that, Rich, is because if the trap is right in front of, like on the bank, all we have to do here is set it in water now. I don't set my traps in water. I always set them underwater. But that's, I'll start rambling on about that. So my thinking behind it is, if my traps are set further away from the actual attractant, then if I get a dog or something that's not supposed to be there, it's going to run along the bank and it's going to go smell that caster, but it's not going to be in any risk of getting caught in those traps that are in the water on the travel way towards it.
Right.
It's kind of my thinking there, if I'm using 330s. But my favorite set for getting the male would be a foothold on a drown rod. I'll use a number 5 double long spring, which is a big trap, or a number 4 double long spring on a 10-foot drown rod.
Okay.
Because I like, as little as you can put a silhouette of a trap in front of an animal, whether it's, a snare for a coyote or a 330 for a beaver. If the trap they don't see or any sign that you're there is honestly my best set. So if I get them on a foothold, and then I like to set all my 330s, I like to do a lot of blind sets for all the rest of them. You find the lodge, you find their channels, all gang set multiple 330s on H stands in front of the house.
Oh, in for the lodge entrances, yeah.
For the lodge entrances and your bank dens, yeah. I set all that. What I have loved, though, probably my favorite trap now is I listened to the podcast of Jim Comstock, and I'll tell you, I'd kiss that man if I ever met him. Probably by far my favorite trap, I think, for beaver, because it, like in these urban areas when I'm setting them, it's a trap I do not have to worry about, especially how I set it. I don't set it in a live capture setting. I set it in a kill capture.
So that's round.
Yeah, so I get them on their runs on a bank den. I think my model is the 18. I think it's the 18 by 12. I have a couple of those.
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, until I talked with Jim, I never paid any attention to live traps, because here in Alberta they were just something that the local PETA lady used for catching the neighbor's cat or whatever, and yeah, so they weren't a serious trapping tool. And when I talked with him and I started looking at them, there's a lot of design in that. Like, and I mean, I overwhelmingly, anybody asks me about a live trapping situation, I recommend Comstock easily, because they are so much better. And the situations that he worries about, like, those guillotine ones where your doors fall straight down, well, that can freeze. He took me through everything that could happen, and I was so impressed with that. As I was like, I never gave that whole cadre of traps, that that whole discipline, the live catch, and I never gave it any respect at all before that.
Yeah, and like, you know, they're definitely, they're not a lesser tool. I use a lot of the coral clam or the Hancock trap, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a big clam. I use that a lot. I use it a little bit asymmetrical. And this is from talking from guys in Massachusetts that's all they have available to them, and they've modified these traps that they're not. Yeah, they're big and they're heavy and everything. You don't want to be carrying, packing in lots of them, but they like the spirit of the trapper. That, you know, they're told, okay, we got to use. You guys can only use these tools, and okay, well, we'll figure it out. And they did. And talking to a guy named Don LaFountain, he traps a lot of beaver, and his one helper there. They showed me a modification they make to the trap where instead of a pan, it's a 330 trigger that they put it. And the way they set that trap and the way they make use of that trap, you know, I started doing the same thing, and I started catching beaver, you know, because it's a lethal set whenever you have a trap that takes up a lot more space in a channel, and it has a lot more reach.
Well, that's
like a Comstock trap.
That's important, and that's probably one of the weakest things that people do is you know, fencing something in, right? And you know, so that you get them to go through that one exact spot. And that's where some bad catches happen in water, especially.
You bet.
You talked about the beaver, the bank dens. Do you have a secret for finding bank dens?
The dogs.
Your dogs find them.
My dogs will find them. Same with muskrat trapping, or they make it easy for me because they're finding all these dens before I even get to them.
Really?
Yeah, so, you know, days I'll still go and verify. You get in the water, you stick your boot in the hole for muskrat, trying to figure out if it's a good run. But no, it's my dogs.
Oh, cool.
Same with the beaver bank dens. A lot of times I know generally where to look. Of course, over time, you know where to look and what to look for, but they confirm it for you.
Yeah, like the simple ones always are on the ends of the dam, because you know he'll patrol his dam in the wintertime. You guys free solid there, do you?
It depends on where my terrain here. It varies. I get some spot where I got to trap, like come wintertime, I got to trap them on the under the ice, and I have some beaver. Well, I'll be trapping them in January, February, and there's no ice, and the beaver have no feed pile because they're able to get out of the water.
Oh, okay. So
you know,
very different.
It really varies.
For my dogs are otters.
Yeah,
I follow the otter, and everywhere the otter goes around a beaver house, that's where you know, if they go up on the bank or go at the bank or whatever, that's where there's a den where they have a bank den or whatever. It's because the otter knows how to get back under the ice. And
my first experience with an otter was just a couple of years ago. We don't really have much otter that I've ever heard of, and I didn't think I had them around here. I was doing a nuisance job and had traps in the water, going to check the traps of the landowner. He drove me to the back of the property, and I'm pulling beaver up, you know, that it got caught, and here's a beaver, there's a beaver, there's a beaver. And then I go back to take him out with the setters and say, what the heck? That's not a beaver. It was an otter. And what it did was it came in, it dug out the side of the house on land, and it chased that kit beaver that I trapped in the channel. It chased it out of the house and got caught right beside him. They got caught in the same trap. Yeah. And that was the first otter I've ever trapped. Since then, I've trapped two more. I trapped two last year, last year, two big dog otter that I'm gonna get them tanned and a little wall hanger type thing.
I'm allowed a dozen a year, and it's not any effort to get my dozen. That's a fact. But I do just about all of mine are blind sets, like in the snow in the wintertime, because they travel back and forth, and it's just you find where they're getting you know, they have access places that they go down to get back under the water, and they travel from one body of water to some cases they go 5-6 miles over land. You know,
they're pretty neat. I think they're pretty neat. I'd love to see one alive. One of my landowners just told me he thought he had muskrat in his pond, but then he said they were otter. It was probably about 5 or 6 otter that came off the river and into his pond, and they were in there dancing around, and then they tore ass out over the bank and left. But like I've only seen them dead in traps. I've never seen them alive. And, you know, I spend a lot of time in the outdoors and stuff. I'd love to see some bouncing around one day alive. But
you see them a lot more often in the winter than you do in the summer.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. I spend a lot of time out my trap line, and I know how many otter are there. We were there this weekend, and we must have crossed 9 or 10 different families, like the tracks from, you know, the different areas that we were through and all that. There's lots and lots of otter again this year. But, you know, you see sign of them in the wintertime, and you can actually catch them, you know, if you happen to come upon where they're going through a hole in the ice into a creek or whatever, they're fishing. Like everybody talks about that otter eat beaver and muskrat. I can't prove that. I can't prove that whatsoever. I mean, I have dug through so many of their toilets, and because they're communal poopers basically, and they all go back up, and lots of times that's a great place to set a trap. You can set a blind one on the trail where they come out of the water and they're going over to the toilet. Another one, you can set another one right on the hole itself where they come up out. And so you get one that comes out, and then the next one comes out, goes to use the toilet, and you get it as well. But I have dug through that, their scat, and all I ever find are little tiny micro fish scales. I find little fish bones. Occasionally I'll find like a frog leg bone or something, but I have never yet found any hair. I've never found a major bone of any sort whatsoever. So I don't know. I know mink eat a lot of muskrat, and I would imagine mink would take on a kit beaver if it get a chance. I mean, a mink is
not much they won't go after. I'm just glad that they're not, you know, like a 50 or 60 pound German Shepherd or something like that, because that's what I say to people. I just dealt with a mink job. It killed over 50 chickens or something like that, and I got them a nice big buck mink. But yeah, I'm glad they're not bigger than they are, because you'd never get out of the truck.
Well, that was I say that about weasel, about the short-tailed weasel. We have two here. We have the least weasel, which is just a little tiny thing like that, and we have the short-tailed weasel, which is the medium-sized one. And you know, I've had tug of wars with them. I'll be trying to set up a bait, like a Wolverine bait, and you know, chicken guts is always good, right? Like in chicken, I'm talking about grouse. We can hunt grouse till the 15th of January here, and so clean them up and throw the guts there, and then the weasels, all the weasels, you know, the marten and the mink and the fish and all that, they love that chicken guts, and you know, you throw it down and you turn around, and you come back and you look, and where did the chicken guts go? And then you see this thing going across the, you know, the streak going through the woods. So you chase after it, and here's this short-tailed weasel, and he's got your big gob of chicken guts in his mouth. And I've had tug of wars with him. I'm holding on to one end of the wing trying to pull it out of it, and they grunt at you. They grunt at you, just like, it's hilarious. And I've often said, if they were the size of a coyote, we'd fear for our lives. We'd never leave.
You bet. And you know, like the mink is what because I grew up on a farm, so you'd see them every now and then. Of course, they come in and they eat the rats. Like anyone who has chickens probably has rats. So they come in, they clean house on the rats, and then once they're done with the rats, if they can get your chickens, then that's the next on the menu. But you know, they were so bold, they'd wait for you to. My aunt, who lived with my parents there and had her chickens, they'd wait for her to open the door and come up. She'd look down one day, sitting beside her like a little chihuahua, you know, the healing right beside her. It's just like, they're so bold, they just do not care.
I've dealt with mink too, out, like you'd be out ice fishing, and they'll come running across the lake. You know, you take a fish off. I remember this so clearly. I don't know, I was early teens, something like that. Took off a perch, threw it on the ice, and we were, I don't know, 100 yards from shore, something like that. And the fish is flopping. I catch another one, and there's another flopping. All of a sudden, this thing comes running out from the bush, comes right over, and it don't even slow down. And it grabs one of my flopping fish and takes off with it, right? And it's a mink. Well, he came back 4 more times that day. You know, like it got to be. It got to be quite the joke, you know, try to chase off this mink, and there was just no. You throw them in a pail, you turn around, and he'd be in the pail after them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're funny creatures, man. You know, when they're around in a chicken coop, you can smell them. That's for sure.
You know, it astounds me though how poorly they swim. Like, I mean, they don't have webbed feet, and they actually have small feet. You know, they have very small feet. A short-tailed weasel probably has just about as big a feet. A long-tailed weasel would have as big a feet as a mink does, and there's no webbing, and yet they are so aquatic. It is hilarious to watch them swim, because they swim rather slowly. I often wonder how they catch anything underwater. You know,
well, they like people's koi ponds in Toronto. I've had experience with. I guess it's easier to catch them, and they can only go so far.
So when you do your damage control, beaver, of course, are a big deal. What other animals?
I don't do. I left that company. I work for another company. I work with Jim Gibb, as I told you there. So I get a lot of time in between our shifts. So I have my own customers. But for me, I phased out of doing the residential stuff. Like a lot of raccoon, especially in Toronto. I phased out of that. I just didn't want to be bothered with that anymore. Carrying ladders, going into attics, all that stuff. So I kind of just try to stick to helping the farmers with the beaver and stuff, and some of these bigger corporations and municipalities with beaver, but also coyote is a big one that I do a lot of urban coyote.
Really?
Yeah, it's, again, like I said, when it comes down to it, I get calls. Oh, there's a coyote here. Well, what's it doing? Oh, it's just there. It's well, you don't have a problem, but I had one in the spring where at first they were seeing a coyote. They're seeing a coyote. It's getting closer. I said, well, there's probably someone feeding it. And then next, it attacks somebody. I said, well, now it's crossed the line. So it has to go. And, once the health and safety stuff gets involved, all the politics there, like the animal has to go. So I struck out there and went and trapped her. There's multiple coyotes. It's not about trapping coyotes. It's about trapping the coyote.
Right.
And I managed to get her after a lot. It takes a lot of work, and I charge for it. I was going there twice a day, maybe 3 times a day sometimes, because this thing was running around in the daytime.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah, and I told them all along. It's like 99. The studies they've done on these urban coyotes, 99.9% of the time, whenever you have an aggressive coyote, it's influenced from people feeding it.
Right.
And after I caught her, and down, the guy told me, yeah, just to let you know, we were kind of talking with one of the security supervisors at this auto manufacturer, and one of the guards at night was feeding this thing. I said, well, you should need to have a conversation with him, a little heart to heart, saying, you're lucky that this coyote didn't actually bite the guy. He had to swing his lunch pail at it to get it to bugger off, type thing. That's how nasty she was. But there's lots of coyotes in the area, but game cameras and stuff like that all do the work. That I had her locked down to a day and a time of day she was moving, and I knew which one it was, and I got her.
So how do you target the coyote like that? What's your bag of tricks look like?
I've been dibble dabbling. This is once again something not my own insight, not my own idea, but setting up snares and then using callers. Like I was, there were sometimes I was spending the night there, type thing, trying to call them because they already had the trails established. I had to set the snares, and had her, RCRs, the relaxing cables. I call them snares for.
Yeah.
But
I understand what you're saying.
hanging leashes, but I was using callers to come and get her through, and figuring all of her trails, and I figured it was a female, and it was, but because she looked kind of rough, like she was going in and out of the den, so she had pups. There was a male coyote there too. He's a fox red one, and then she had 3 pups that I think left with the male. Because after I trapped her, I tried to get after the male, even though he wasn't doing anything. But now that this coyote caused a problem, they wanted blood, right? So they wanted to eradicate everything, but they weren't quick enough making a decision on that. So I got the one that was causing the problem, because they had photos of her too, and then I compared photos that I was getting off of my cameras. And the nice thing is, cell phone cameras, they send it right to your phone. I don't actually have to be on site.
Yeah.
And figuring out the movement patterns. That was a big thing. Is figuring, they're just like going to the fridge. You get up and you go to the fridge at night, or you go up to go to the washroom. She was traveling the same route all the time. And different coyotes were kind of traveling similar areas, but she had a specific path that she would take every day. And so you just got to be there at the right time.
It's fascinating too, when animals step outside the normal habits, like you say, when it's traveling during the daylight. Yeah, that's a big no-no, especially situation where, in civilization where there's lots of people. Now, I just set up a coyote bait here on my home quarter last Friday, and I put up trail cams right away. Right, the trail cams were actually there before I threw the bait in, and still, even today, the only trail cam video I'm getting of coyotes is at night. There's lots of birds, there's lots of eagles, all that kind of stuff, but the coyotes are still just at night. And even though now they've fed on it for 4 or 5 days, they still only come at night. So they haven't suspended all fear or anything else, right?
Well, the ones I saw just the other day were probably the worst I've seen for just that urbanization of the coyote. Is a golf course that gave me a call through a referral for another golf course that I trapped coyote for before. They have coyotes there, 5 pups or better, and then 2 adults at least. I go there and there's a coyote sleeping in one of the bunkers of the little sand pits there at the golf course. Right in broad daylight. I was there about, I don't know, 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. in the morning. He's just sleeping there. And I probably could have walked right up to him and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and thrown him in my truck. Like, I'm pretty confident I could have done that.
Wow.
And he just did. He could not give less of a care that I was there looking at him.
That's too bad too, because I mean,
on the couch.
Yeah, I mean it's too bad because they become just acclimatized, and then all of a sudden one day things don't go their way, and they get vicious, and then it's an over and done deal.
Well, and that's it. And again, I'm assuming an animal that's been conditioned to be so comfortable with people. I'm assuming that there's people on the golf course, whether it's members or groundskeepers or whatever, that are feeding them.
Well, yeah, I mean, and they're pretty damn good scroungers too. It's like, you ever watch that movie, The Great Outdoors, with John Candy and the raccoons?
And the raccoons, yeah.
Every time I talk to you guys, you ADC guys back there, see, we have no raccoon here. I have never caught a raccoon in my life. I have no experience whatsoever. But every time I talk to you ADC guys, I think of that movie and about the different things they go through, and you put rocks on top of the garbage can. That never works. All they go. But coyotes, I know, are very efficient at scrounging, and so it's not that you're necessarily feeding them, but if you're leaving something that's accessible, that becomes a source of food, and they know that you're the one that's leaving it accessible, whether you're throwing it to them or putting it in a garbage can. Your smell is still all over it, and so they associate you with that food.
Yeah, and I often, I give the example to people. I said, like, they think there's something wrong with them. Of course, when they're seeing them in daylight, okay, there's something wrong with them. I said, well, I can guarantee you, it's probably a perfectly healthy animal, but they've lost. Just like you go downtown Toronto, you walk down the street, you're tripping on pigeons.
Yeah.
They've lost respect for people. It's become white noise to them, and we're just white noise to the pigeons. It's the same thing with the coyote. The only difference is the coyote has teeth, and it's 10 times larger than a pigeon, and has the ability to do damage to a person. So that's where it becomes a problem. But it's just that most of the time people see a coyote, they avoid them. A certain time of year, of course, when people are running their dogs off leash and stuff, and coyotes get territorial, they get ornery when breeding season, so that's when people's dogs start getting torn up and stuff like that. But
yeah,
it's just really an urbanization of the animal. They, like you say, they're very efficient at finding food. The only time I've ever seen a starving coyote is because there's something wrong with it.
That's right. We have those situations where somebody will shoot a wolf and they'll get a hold of me and they say, it's got mange. I mean, I stood there and I got time and I got to shoot it, and it's got mange. So are there that many? I know. No, you got to shoot it because it's got mange and it's not in good shape. It's not thinking well, and it's not healthy. That's why you got the shot at it. But people don't ever put 2 and 2 together, right?
Yeah,
they figured they did it a favor, and in this country they most likely did do it a favor. Not many animals make the winter with mange, not a chance. But the mange was the overlying problem in the whole situation, right?
I've only trapped one with mange, and that was the last year. My fur trapping season for coyote was probably, I don't even want to talk about it because it was a bad season. everything that could go wrong, just, it's one of those, I'm embarrassed to say with how many I caught. Like, by the time things started connecting, it just, the season was pretty well over. And my wife was nice enough to let me extend it despite my pouting, because I'm just too stupid to give up, I guess. I don't know, but
Did you learn anything?
Pardon me?
Did you learn anything?
Oh God, yeah.
There you go. Then that wasn't wasted.
yeah. There's a lot of.
You guys get.
I went into it. I went into it kind of last year trying to do something new, trying not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but trying to go at it at a different angle. And it just didn't work. So this year I'm just going back to my roots. In the next couple of weeks, probably end of November, I'll get to foot trapping, because that's what I prefer, foot trapping them. So I'm going to run more equipment over run a long line on them and try and get as many as the young dumb as I can. And then I take a break, and generally January 1st, I'll have bait out at locations beforehand, but January 1st, I'll start setting RCRs on baits and try and just do the month of January like that. Just getting what trickles in type
So
thing.
I got to know what did you do last year that didn't work? The reinvention here, and I want to know what your favorite
Just
foothold
trying to
is.
run a mixture. I was trying to. Our weather is it's kind of like what Mark Zager talked about, his weather. Our weather is just here, especially in Southern Ontario now, it gets pretty volatile. And if it just stayed cold, I could deal with it. If it just stayed warmer, I could deal with it. But it's always the phase between, we'll get freezing rain, or we'll get a big warm up, and then we'll get freezing rain, and then we'll get snowfall, and then we'll get a warm up, and then, so on and so forth. So what I was trying to do, I was trying to run a lot of wax dirt. I was trying to make foot trapping more in January, where it's too hard to keep traps operating.
Okay.
And that was my issue. You get all the gear out, and then you get a big snowfall, and then you go and you dust off the sets. You maybe catch a few, but then you get a big freezing rain. So you're fighting the weather more. And the biggest thing is, what I learned is, don't go to the coyotes, or don't get the coyotes, or you go to the coyotes, get them to come to you. And all I mean by that is, you go at them on your terms, which is exactly what Mark Zager does. He goes and he traps. I did Mark Zager's Coyote U as well, and I learned a lot from. Maybe you don't adapt everything that you learn, but there's a lot. What I took away from Zager's course the most is, meet them on your terms, is what I'm talking about. He gets at them whenever the weather is the most suitable and viable for him to run a lot of gear, keep it operating, and produce animals. So was kind of my mistake. Is I was trying to make the terrain and the weather meet what I wanted to do, rather than adapting to what the weather was doing. And it really set me back.
See, here we can foothold. Our canines all open the 1st of October. Yeah. However, they're not prime. I'm not even killing canines right now. No. I will probably start setting towards the end of the first week of November, but I get my bait out early. But if you're going to foothold, I know people in central Alberta and southern Alberta where they don't get the snow and that. Now this is when they're footholding, and sure. They don't have snow, they don't have wet, and it's a good time for footholding, right? Once again, they're making the conditions and the method work together. For us here, you'd have started to, maybe for the first 2 weeks of October, you'd have done footholding. Then you go away from that, because this time of the year now it's wet, dry, all that kind of stuff. And if you're going to foothold again in November when the snow is here and to stay, then we foothold in the snow. You use snow just like you'd use your wax dirt. But when then, as soon as it's starting to get cold now their food demands are higher, then those bait piles are very hard for them to resist, and that's where we kill most of them over snares, wolves or coyotes.
And that was kind of another bugger up on my part too, is the weather. How the weather was, it remained on average. My best year that I had for coyotes since I started because I haven't trapped coyotes since I started trapping. I started water trapping for quite a while, and I never really looked at land trapping for coyotes. I just, for some reason, it just didn't click with me. Plus, you hear all the people talking about, you basically got to wear a hazmat suit to put a scent in because of human odor. But this is the stuff that was out there, right?
Yeah.
And then you start going to places like Zager. But anyhow, my first introduction to coyote trapping was actually in Texas. I went to Texas, northern Texas in March. Me and James Corsell, I'm good friends with James Corso. We talk all the time, but we went to Texas there to go trap.
I actually did a podcast with him last week. And
yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah,
and I published it today.
I'll have to listen to that one. Yeah, that's good. But we were talking. I would listen to your Idaho, talking to the Idaho trappers there about wolf trapping, and I put that bug in his ear about going to Idaho. So I told him that the one gentleman you interviewed, I can't remember his name,
Rusty.
is Roger Roman.
Yes.
Yeah, he loves the Coro wolf trap. I said, well, there you go. We need to talk to him. He'll go around when we go to Idaho.
Yeah, Roger's a good guy, and then and he's the head of
management for
wildlife
for wildlife management.
Yeah, and then I also did one with Rusty Kramer, who's the head of the Idaho Trappers Association.
Yeah, I listened to that one too. You talk about wolf trapping or whatever, you get my attention. I've never trapped a wolf. I'd love to go trap, especially foothold trapping a wolf. I think that'd be the coolest thing.
So your favorite foothold for coyotes?
My favorite foothold is probably a Jake trap, but they're not AEDIS certified.
Yeah.
The ones I use are a Bridger number 3 with it's a modified jaw is what it calls.
The Canadian number 3. Yeah.
That's my favorite trap. I do have some MB550 rubber jaws. I've caught coyote with them. I'm not a big fan of rubber jaw personally. The rubber on the pads gets all torn up. Like you got to do more maintenance on the rubber pads than anything, because then what if you do get cold weather? Of course, you're going to get a catch when it's the coldest. All those little barbs where they've torn it up. Well, that gets hard, and next you have an animal with foot damage on it.
Well, here in the north, that rubber gets too hard anyway. And I mean, it's the same as it being steel. I don't agree with rubber jaws on any of those footholds and that for this far north, and it doesn't work for me. I've wolf traps. I used Coro. I've used lay. I've used the Bridger Braun. And that kind of stuff. Those big stuff. I also have Harris centerfire, like out of Montana.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Wonderful trap. But now this year we have to use certified wolf traps. Yeah. And that's going to limit a lot.
I think that's a Bridger Alaskan number 5 rubber jaw or offset.
No, there's a Victor number 4. A number 3 Victor 4 coil rubber jaw that has been certified for wolf. If you can believe it.
Really? You can even fit their. That was kind of my hesitation too with the MB. I used MB550s in Texas, but they had the ones we used was a laminated offset jaw.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot bigger trap in Texas, but then these MB550 rubber jaws, when you're using them, they seem like they're puny. And I've caught some big coyotes, I've caught ones that were weighed. That I caught a 55-pound coyote. I caught a 51-pound coyote. Like those are big coyotes. Those are the ones that everyone tells me I saw a wolf, or a toy wolf, or I said I don't go and use all those different words for them. I call them an eastern coyote, which is basically a mongrel. You can call them the Algonquin wolf, the coy dog, werewolf, whatever you want. But to me, they're just eastern coyotes. Some of them are bigger than others. I caught my first black one in the spring. I've caught one that looked like a German Shepherd.
There's some of those ones you guys get back east there. I wouldn't kill when I walked up to it because I'm sure I'm killing somebody's dog.
I get a good pocket in my area of fox red ones. I trapped a lot of fox red last year.
Oh, really?
There's one I trapped that was as red as my beard.
Kidding.
That was that was the first coyote I trapped of the season was this big fox red guy, and he was a 51-pounder.
Well, the biggest problem though is for years the way the agreement read was that we could modify our own wolf traps, and it was going to be fine. Well, I'm now been dealing with a conservation officer and the government of Alberta, because this year we are supposed to use the certified ones, the ones that only been certified. Well, like Coro isn't certified. Harris isn't certified.
I thought it was all.
Not for wolf.
They caught their number.
Not for wolf. And I mean, when you're foot holding an animal with a trap the size of a lay or a Coro or even a Bridger Brawn, and a Bridger Brawn probably weighs half of what the other two do. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's half the steel there. So you're talking about a very heavy trap. The amount of swivels you have is so important when it comes to damage, right? And you know, if they're not controlling those kind of variables, then it's not a real fair test of the trap, because any one of those traps holds an animal. You know, like, I mean, no question. So, but for coyotes, I was doing some of the Bridger stuff, and I just wasn't really impressed with it. And I started getting into the Belial foot snare.
I have Belial foot snares as well. That I use. Mind you, I just started using them last year, and I haven't caught a coyote with them. But
They
the guy I work for now, he's done a lot with the Belial foot snare and modifications to them and stuff like that. So I'm fortunate enough that I have the Belial foot snare guy, if you want to ask someone about Belial foot snares type thing. So, but I'm yet to catch a coyote with one.
Are we talking about Darcy?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is a genius. He is a genius.
He's a very smart man. I've learned a lot from him. You know, and he's you know, he wants to be out there trapping, but he can't always be out there trapping. So I'm one of those guys. I'll bug you with questions if I want to know the answer. I want to know, like I said, just lessening that learning curve, right? So I don't need to make the same mistakes that you did. You know, if you know better, you'll tell me, okay, don't do this, and this is why. Okay, well, I won't do that, because that's what, you know, it's not all this bull crap type, you know.
No, there's no sense BS, and be straight about it. You know, I mean, if it's a 30-pound coyote or a 40-pound coyote, whatever, that's what it is. The thing that I enjoyed talking to Darcy about the foot snare, and I want to get him on the podcast here, but that I enjoy, he doesn't look at them like they're a foothold. He treats them so much differently than you would a regular foothold. And all of a sudden, when I started looking at all those things, you know, the fact that he can preset them all and take them out into the, out to the bush with them.
They're all preset in the bit.
Yeah, and when you start thinking about that stuff, and then when you start thinking about how much they weigh, you know, the difference in weight, and then once the snares on it, that's all it's there. You don't have a 7 or 8 or 9 pound trap hanging off them like you do with the Dan Lay, right? You know, which causes its own damage problems, and you know, all that. Where I had my biggest success, even though I used them differently than he did, and I've learned so much from him, was the coming up through the snow. Like, I mean, they come up so fast and so good through the snow. There is not a regular conventional trap out there that'll come through the snow like that will.
No, and that's, like I say, my favorite foothold trap is the Jake trap. One of the elements of the Jake trap I love, which I wish I've been bugging James about. He needs to make a coyote model trap with wire levers. The wire levers on the Jake trap.
Yeah.
They come up so much faster.
Yeah.
Because it has that much less resistance. The same thing with the Belial foot snare. Like, you don't have these big jaws coming up through the snow or through the debris and everything.
Yeah.
They're nice traps. I did have some. I actually sold my Jake traps to James, because he uses them where he is in Manitoba.
Well, I mean, when you talk about it, and everybody talks about, you know, because what we're talking about is the springs, and whether the springs have a guard on them or not.
Yeah.
Here's a Harris. This is a Harris centerfire, and these don't have a guard on them, right? So that coming up through the resistance of it coming through the snow or through the duff or whatever is no big deal. But now if you have a guard over top of that, you know, like some people believe, like the number 9 Alaskan and James from Coyote Traps, he has a guard over that so that this can't be chewed on. Well, that's all more resistance when it's coming up out of frozen ground and that, right?
Yeah, you bet.
So.
Yeah, I do a lot of when it comes to coyotes. If I have the snow, my favorite way to trap them is a foothold on a drag, on a trail in a footprint. I wish I need to get more drags, because I lay them out whenever you do that, because it's not a snare in their face. It's not an attractor. There's no attractor, them coming up to a set. It's just them traveling. And you put that trap in a paw print or whatever, and then you get a snow that night, you have them.
The thing about coyotes too is that they're not afraid of steel.
No.
Like that's the thing about wolves. Our wolves here, they will go out of their way. The smell of steel is a bad thing for them. But a coyote might crawl under a dozen barbed wire fences in a day. The smell of steel doesn't bother him at all.
No.
You know?
No, you're absolutely right there. No, they're I use like I say, I like using a lot of drags. And I'll paint those traps white too.
Yep.
So, you know, if you get a little bit of snow, but like I said, our weather is so volatile where you'll have a foot of snow and then 2 days later it'll be +5 and all the snow's gone, you know, so it's your equipment and what you're using, it can become problematic real overnight. And also just a lot of freezing rain, getting those snares back and operable again. Once you had a good freezing rain, you know, you got to go through them all and make sure.
Yeah. We end up with that situation too.
It's just on the trap line.
I'm going to let you go. I imagine you've got stuff to check. I know that I've got, I got to go over and I got a few more trail cams that I've got to check, but I have had a most enjoyable time talking with you. It's always so interesting. We'll have to do this again sometime. Okay.
No, I appreciate you offering to, like I said in the message, I'm not sure if I'm interested enough to be on the podcast, but I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to come chat. It's nice to meet you.
We've talked better part of an hour and a half, man.
Hey, it's so fun. Yeah, my dogs are just snoozing. They had a long morning out on the line pulling all my beaver sets, so I got a pile of beaver that I got to go take care of. No.
If people want to reach you, how do they reach you? You got a website?
I keep pretty low key. I don't have a website. I don't know. I'm on Facebook when I do check it, and sbwildlifesolutions@gmail.com is my email. But like I say, I keep pretty low key. I just put my head down and work. But I'm fortunate enough that I get to do this. This crazy stuff year round.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah,
that's perfect. Well, I appreciate you being here, and we'll wrap it up with that. And thank you, everybody, for listening along. It has been a wonderful time, and maybe we'll see you down the line.